My name is Colin Cook. I am 43 years old. I live in Brookline, New Hampshire. I have four kids, 12, 10, 8, and 7. I live with my wife, Kristen. And I own Peak Recovery and Health Center, which is a wellness center now based in Manchester, New Hampshire. And I would say how I got into this, I will say even performance and wellness and all these things are really primarily through drugs and alcohol. And was a collegiate hockey player, but definitely partying became my priority and was headed down the wrong direction for quite a while. And it was signing up for the Boston Marathon, or actually running as a bandit in this 2009 Boston Marathon that really started to turn things around for me.
That's amazing. Um, Talk a little bit about like your hockey, because was that where like the drugs and alcohol started? Was that like the beginning of it all?
I mean, hockey players are definitely known for their partying for sure. So yeah, I would say that that was definitely a contributor for sure. But as especially in college, well, when I played Division One at Quinnipiac University, I was a third string goalie. So there was pretty much no shot I was going to play in any significant games. So I guess you could say, I don't know if I should say I used it to my advantage, but I allowed it to I partaked quite a bit in indulging in drugs and alcohol, and that kind of got worse, I would say, after really hitting the wall of not having hockey in my life anymore. And
Hmm.
really, I think it's a challenge for a lot of kids and just young adults as they move into the real world, and they're used to having that structure, especially with hockey, with practice every day, all these things, and then it's just gone.
Yeah.
Right. And, I tried filling that with going to the gym, and, now I can bounce 225 pounds instead of 215. And it's like, great. It didn't really, wasn't very satisfying. And, that's what I love about multi-sport and endurance sports is you can be competitive the rest of your life.
So how did you stumble onto multisport triathlon running? Was it like somebody just dangled it in front of you and you were like, challenge accepted? Or, did you?
No, it was actually, so I signed up for my first half Ironman probably a month or so before the marathon, and it was kind of like, all right, this is awesome. And no offense to you pure runners out there, but it was like, just running, not every day at that point. I wasn't even running every day, but running 4 to 5 times a week. I was looking for something a little bit different, and really just, so I signed up for half Ironman in September of 2009, and just absolutely fell in love with the multi-sport, doing different things, challenging myself in different ways, and really haven't looked back.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, and just for context, you've done all the distances right up to Ironman.
Yeah.
You've done Ironman Hawaii as well, right? Kona
I have, yeah. So
championships.
I've got 21 Ironmans under my belt now, 7 of which have been in Hawaii at the Ironman World Championships. I've been ranked number 1 in the country in my age group 2 of the last 3 years, and was 10th in Kona last year. A little bit disappointed, to be honest with that. I was hoping for a bit better. Did have dual hernia surgery in December, which I had the hernia during the prep and during the race. So there's my excuse. But yeah, it had some really good success as well.
That's your excuse for coming in 10th, Colin?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, I'm going to use that next time. So it's suffice to say that, like, once you really started getting into this, was there like, I guess, like, was there one point at which you realized that the recovery part of this was just as important as the actual physical training and the exertion?
Yeah. I think it's also even coaching has also helped me with that too, is
Mm,
recognizing, even not even necessarily recovery, and just making sure we're getting the appropriate amount of load, right? And if we're not recovering sufficiently, we can't put as much load on the body, right?
hmm.
And, anything we do, we're not going to benefit from it if we're not actually absorbing it, right?
Yeah.
So, those were the things that definitely, and I would say, to be honest, like, so at that point I was, and I still have a full-time job in the cybersecurity world. And at that point, I was traveling a decent amount. So I was going to some of the larger cities that did have cryotherapy and all these things. And I said, wow, this is really cool, and started recognizing the benefits from it. And the entrepreneurial mind kind of just started saying, well, there's nothing like this in, Southern New Hampshire here. And so that's what kind of got things kicked off, I would say.
Yeah, that's awesome. I I've known you through my husband, through,
Yeah.
biking and cycling and all that stuff. And my first introduction to peak was post Ghost Train.
Yes,
Well,
I
like,
remember actually. I do remember you coming in.
yeah, yeah. So, and I tell this story a lot, and I think it's like we can kind of like segue into, talking about peak and whatnot. But I, remember having conversations with you at cyclocross races about it and being like, oh, that's so amazing. I got to go check it out. And I stashed it away in the back of my brain. And then I think it was like the first year I finished Ghost Train, I had preemptively like made an appointment the very next day afterwards. And if I had thought of it, I should have really like documented the whole thing, because I drove myself there, which, just for context, I was kind of wrecked after that first 100. I drove myself there. I was
That doesn't
not.
make any sense. Come on.
I know, I really was. It was my, like, yeah, I was definitely.
I'm being sarcastic. Sorry. I mean, come on. 100-miler, I can only imagine. So for the record, I have never done more than a marathon or Ironman, marathon. I've never run an ultra myself here, and give you all a tremendous amount of credit, and just am awe of how you guys do that, and don't know how you do it.
Well, two things. First of all, if you can do an Ironman, you can 100% run an ultra. Second thing, you have one literally in your backyard, Ghost Train. Like, it is quite literally in your backyard.
There's a funny story on that. So during COVID, I actually signed up for the 100-miler of Ghost Train. And
how did I not know this?
Well, I mean, because it got canceled.
I know, but like, how did I not know this?
But I will also admit that when it got canceled, there was a little bit of a sigh of relief.
Well, wait, back up. So how did you, what made you hit because that's not easy to do, because you have to be hovering over the button when that thing goes live to get an entry into Ghost Train, because it sells out pretty quickly.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I was just, I would like to at some point definitely experience the ultra thing and see how it goes, and would be very, very intrigued to do it. But it's always just something that I haven't been willing to sacrifice my training into triathlon to be able to commit to it like I would like to. But I do think Ghost Train will be the one I do when the day does come here.
All right, you heard it here first. We're gonna
there you go.
Date and timestamp this so that later on down the line we can do like the version 2 of this, where we
extra motivation for me.
So I drove myself to Peak, got out of the car, and I sat in the car for a second, and I was just like, am I going to be able to like actually walk into the door? And I mustered up all the strength that I had to be able to walk in and not look like a total shit show. And I don't remember the woman who was working the desk, and you were there too.
Yep.
And I got in there and I was like, okay, like, I really hope this works. And I was not prepared for exactly how cold it was, but it's only 3 minutes and I made it through. And I shit you not, I was able to actually walk back to my car, and I was in probably half as much discomfort as when I went in. And I was just like, this is legitimate magic. Like, I don't understand.
Wild, right?
I don't want to really understand, but it works, and it's so amazing. So
we actually do have, I don't know if it was that year or the next year, Yuki, I'm drawing a blank on Yuki's last
Chorney.
She
Yuki
actually
Chorney.
Right, she did do a quick documentary. She showed herself actually on crutches the day before or after the race, and then she came in and she did whole body cryotherapy and photobiomodulation, and then she was just walking normally, like just in total awe.
Yep. So, I do remember that now that you said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
God. So talk to people a little bit about Peak, what it is, because we've been throwing around, like, I can't say the one you just said without messing it up. Like, I always mess it up. But cryotherapy, you guys do like a ton of different stuff. So talk a little bit about that so people have an understanding.
We do. So we've got a wide range of modalities. I'd say everything at its core, for the most part, is really about reducing inflammation, right? But we'll start with whole body cryotherapy, which is, probably the most well-known for a lot of people in these, and the one that Megan was referencing there. So what that is it's we'll call it a cold kind of chamber. So we open up a door. We kind of set up the appropriate number of pads. So you keep your head outside of the consumption area here, if you will, but there's nitrogen leverage to get down to extremely cold temperatures. So inside the chamber there, it's we set it to negative 220 degrees Fahrenheit. So Very, very cold. I will say, as cold as it is, and actually as a regular cold plunger now, it is so much more comfortable than doing cold plunging. And the sensation to the body is, well, yes, it's cold. I'm not trying to kid anybody on
Yeah.
that. Most people find it a lot more tolerable than trying to handle an ice bath or a cold plunge.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I'm not somebody who's like really drawn to the whole cold plunge
Okay.
thing, but for people listening, it's kind of like a big cylinder tank. And when he says like there's nitrogen, liquid nitrogen, you're not like in it. It's sort of like falling
Yes.
over the side of the tank, and it kind of like creates this pool,
Yep.
in the tank, and you have to, when you're in there, it's kind of funny because they ask you to like march around in a circle. It's almost like you're a little rotisserie chicken inside this like
Exactly.
cold chamber
Exactly.
to make sure you get it, evenly covered as you're doing it. But it does also help to occupy your mind because it is cold, but it is very doable. Side note, I have a client who is now a regular over
Yeah.
there.
Cool.
And I suggested it to her at one point because she was just like having a whole lot of inflammation all over. I was like, you really should go try cryo over there. She comes back like 2 days later. She goes, okay, I'm addicted. Like, I'm going to float next week. Then we're going to do cryo. She's like
You
completely,
sweetheart. Yeah, it's
completely
great to hear.
addicted to it. And I think it's really easy to do, especially if you have an experience like that or like I did, where you go in and you feel like there's no possible way that I'm going to feel better. And then you walk out and you're like, okay, that's legit magic.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and to go into a little more detail, what's happening to the body here is we're activating the fight or flight response mode, right? So all the blood and everything is rushing to your core of your body to kind of protect itself, keep it warm. And as a result, all the blood is kind of recirculated throughout the body. That can reduce inflammation. Also, it activates adrenaline and endorphins to help alleviate some of that pain and that tension or whatever you're feeling, whether it be just the DOMS and, the results of a race or a hard workout, or if you're somebody that's in chronic pain and just always dealing with something, that it can really help cross the gamut with helping with those kinds of issues.
And you guys do it locally too, like on
Correct.
knees or, specific body parts as well.
Exactly. Yeah, that reminds me of another more triathlete. I think he's done a few ultras as well, though. But we had a gentleman that had his knee scoped, and he came in, actually every day or every other day, I think, for about a week. And within 2 weeks of his surgery, he was jumping off one foot, on that side and getting the load on his knee, and was very convinced that the cryotherapy and the inflammation reduction that we were helping to do was really helping with that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So that's one of the things.
Yep.
What are some of the other modalities or like services that you
So
guys
we
have over
have
there?
the mouthful we'll go with next here,
Yeah.
photobiomodulation, or PBM for short. We could definitely go with PBM.
Great. We'll do that.
Yeah. But it's also very similar and often referenced as low-level light therapy. And if you come in and you see the machine that we have, it really looks like a tanning bed. But I always say that's where the comparisons kind of end there. But it can be extremely powerful. It's typically a 12-minute service. So you go in and you turn it on. Ideally, you go in nude, and the light is penetrating through your skin, and it can really help with ATP production and cellular function. So, can treat the entire body, and really the possibilities are kind of endless with what it can do. But that one is, to be fair, that's not like cryotherapy where you get out and you get that instant kind of gratification from it. A lot of times people will come out and it's like, okay, thank you, and they don't necessarily feel the effects. But then a lot of times they'll sleep better that night, and then by the next day, like another good example, actually, another friend of mine, I guess, but a person that he was a cancer survivor, and he would regularly, when he'd wake up and he'd go down the stairs every day, he would feel really tight and just kind of like really take him a little bit to kind of wake up, if you will. And the next day he just walked down the stairs and he literally like stopped at the bottom and was just like, what just happened there? Like, couldn't really believe. So those are types of scenarios and things that we see where it can benefit. But yeah, that cellular production and efficiency can be really benefited from that one.
Is that one sort of like something that you want to do more regular? Like I'm assuming the dosage, so to speak,
Yep.
for all these things is kind of different. So I know you
Correct.
mentioned that like it's not like cryo. You're not going to get that like instant hit when you get out. So that's one like every, couple of days or,
Correct.
frequently or regularly?
Yep. Yep. So that one is, and it's really actually with the more regular use, but at the same time, you actually can overdo it with that one.
Oh,
So we
interesting.
actually don't let people go in back to back days, or certainly not multiple sessions per day. So ideally, we want to have at least 2 days in between each session. So people typically come in when they're really trying to treat something 2 to 3 times a week.
Hmm. Why is that? Like, why? What's?
So the kind of analogy I use here, hopefully makes sense, is like, let's say you're gonna cook your turkey, right? For your Thanksgiving turkey here, right? And let's say for simplicity, it's 400 degrees for 4 hours, right? You know, in argument, you could try and do 12 hours at 100 degrees, right?
Mm,
Or you could try to do 800 degrees for an hour, right? And those
yep.
aren't really going to give you what you want, right? So you can overstimulate the cells and then end up having more of a challenge with them, or not, getting the benefits by doing too much of it.
I think that's a good analogy. I think the whole, like trying to speed up the
Right.
baking time by just jacking up the temperature.
Exactly. Right.
People definitely, anyone who has like a little bit of cooking knowledge
Nobody
probably.
can relate to that on this. I'm sure that's listening here,
Yeah.
right?
All right. The other thing that I did when I was there was compression therapy.
Yeah,
And I really like that too. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like that's one where, you could definitely buy the boots, and
for
do them
sure.
at home. But I feel
Yep.
like the ones that I had, do they even make those for at home use? The ones that go almost all the way up to your
You
hips?
can you can get them, yeah, but so they are the brand. So I would say we don't use Normatec. Normatec's probably the biggest company out there, and people may be referencing or
Hmm.
familiar with that name. But Recovery Pump is the name of the products that we use there, and so yeah, they do have a very unique one that I don't think Normatec has that same offering, where it goes, so they go up past the legs and all the way up into kind of your lower abdomen, so that they're able to get your glutes, your butt, and all those, the hips and everything
Hmm.
around there, which yes, you can buy. They're pretty pricey, but
Yeah.
yeah, those are, you don't see those too many places. Yeah.
And what's the benefit of that?
So the compression there and the release, so it's, you can set different timings and things for it depending on what exactly you're looking for, but it's basically applying pressure to the muscles and then releasing on that, and that can really significantly reduce, that muscle fatigue and DOMs and those types of things. But it's also used, right, like post surgery, when you're just looking to recirculate and get the blood flowing better. It can really help with that as well.
Mm. I do feel like Normatec it's kind of like, ubiquitous. Like if somebody's going to look something up on the internet, Google it, right? If you talk about compression boots, it's like
It's
Normatec boots, but there
Normatec.
are, to your point, a
I
couple
mean,
other brands
yeah,
that are
there
out
is
there.
quite a few different companies actually that make them now these days, and you can
Yeah.
kind of get some knockoff ones pretty reasonably. Be careful a little bit with those, making sure you have the right pressure and some different things there. But there's definitely some great options out there.
I think one of the next like really good questions on that, because you brought up the pressure,
Mm.
is should it hurt? Like how much of a squeeze
That's a
should people
great
get?
question. Yeah. So I guess it depends a little bit on what exactly you're looking for, right? And I would say usually actually people are get more benefit out of it by going a little bit less than too much. So yeah, if we're getting to that point where you're like, kind of feeling that tension, and you probably got it a little bit too hard, and you'd probably actually be better off. You want the pressure. You don't want to make it so light that you're not getting anything out of it. But I would say that most people usually end up, and even talking to Recovery Pump and some of the other experts in the industry, they say that they feel like even they make them go a little bit harder than they should, and it's because some people feel like they need to get that feeling to get it
Mm.
to that it's actually working, when you really don't.
I think that's such a good point because there's always the more is
Yeah.
better, more
Right.
concept, especially when it comes to endurance sports, right? And training. And if we kind of like do our sport hard or we're like all into it, then we
Yeah.
also kind of take that same mentality over into the recovery stuff, and we're kind of aggressive about our recovery too. And sometimes I have to guide people and be like, it actually, shouldn't hurt, or we need to
Exactly.
take some extra rest, or you can do less of this or that in order to get some more recovery. So the more is better theory doesn't necessarily apply to compression, or even some like you're just talking about the PBM and even cryo. I would imagine like there is a limit,
Oh,
to
for
that
sure.
for
Yep.
sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess I'll segue that into massage, which most
Mm,
people are familiar with, right? And I think, it's definitely a self preference for people there, but most times, a little bit lighter actually ends up being more beneficial to people. I mean, if you tense up, right, and it's so hard that the
Yeah.
muscle is tense there, you can't get in there, that the massage therapist can't get in as deep to be able to actually get the work done. So,
Hmm.
I prefer I shouldn't say wimpy massages, but definitely on the lighter side. And I'm not looking for somebody to bring torture on my body during those.
Well, yeah, because then you're going to feel it, the next day, and that's the other, the next step in that process is like if you go hard on the recovery stuff, you haven't really recovered, and you're going to have to turn around the next day or the day after and do whatever scheduled workout you have. So you got to think smart about what you're doing
Totally.
with that
And I
recovery.
mean, I'd actually like when we're talking about massage here, I would highly encourage everybody to get massages regularly, but I would encourage you to do those after your workouts for that day. I wouldn't encourage you to, go get a massage and then later that day go do your workout, because it is like a workout, right? And your body
Yeah.
is recovering, and you want to actually allow it to absorb what you just put it through. So that's definitely a general rule of thumb that I give people, is to try and do that a little bit later, or get your workouts done nice and early if you're gonna, so you don't have to do that our workouts after the massage.
I'm completely useless after a massage
Yeah,
because I just want to go home and go to bed or, lay on the couch and drink all the water and watch a
yeah,
movie or do something. So I'm not sure how people schedule a massage and then try and do anything else.
right,
That's why I'm
right,
always trying to get it done on like a Saturday or something, or like, a midweek day off
yeah,
so that I can just veg out for the rest of the day.
totally, yep, yeah.
So let's talk about the float tank too, because that's
Mm.
another one that my client is like obsessed with now. And I've not done this one, and I think it might be like next on my like
We got
peak
to get you over there
recovery,
to
yeah,
try that.
bucket
We
list.
really do. So, what I say with float therapy, it's often referred to as, and I feel like when I was building out peak recovery, I kind of felt like I had done it once before. I really hadn't had a ton of experience with it, to be fair, and I was kind of like, okay, cool, but it wasn't at the top of my list. All right, and now it is hands down my favorite, and what I try to do at least once a week for me, even
Really?
sometimes twice a week. Yes, I absolutely love float therapy. Yeah. So what it is there's different variations of it. We have what we call as a float room, so it has a nice high ceiling. So there is, some people do have concerns about claustrophobia and things. They do have these kind of really more of a tub with this lid over it, and it can, a lot of people actually get in and they say they don't feel as claustrophobic as they thought they would, but it is, enclosed, and ideally we want the lights off. It's really in tight there. So people can get that sensation, but fortunately, like I said, ours is very high ceiling. I think it's 7 feet tall. So, but
Mm,
the core of it, and what's really important, is it's about 10 inches, excuse me, of water, and it's got over 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt in it. All right, so it's really simulating the Dead Sea, right?
yeah.
And so, it's extremely buoyant. So what we want to do is we want to go in and we literally just want to float, right? So we're on our back and trying to relax as much as possible, allowing the spine, the entire body to just decompress. And you can have, I like to put meditative music on, but you can have no music. You can have light on there as well, but I like to black it out for sure. And it's really the only place I know of in the world these days where you can actually go and, you don't bring your cell phone in, right? You don't have, your significant other in there, your work stress, your training stress, all these different things. It just allows, so as good as it is physically for your body and for your muscles, and that is actually the way our body prefers, excuse me, to absorb its salt and its magnesium through the skin. So
Mm,
that's where it's great being laying in it like that. But it's more for your mind. And so, whether it's stress, anxiety, it can improve cognitive thinking. There's so many different benefits from it. It's just, I've had times where I've been, pretty stressed out, and it's actually still probably my favorite thing at peak is watching people when they come in to float, and then when they come out, and you can just see like the change in their whole mindset and things from that. So,
yeah. That's
um,
crazy. It's like a total sensory
yeah,
deprivation tank, but in a
exactly.
good
Right.
way.
It is.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, that's definitely, it is a sensory deprivation tank, but yeah, we mostly call it float therapy now. But really, really can be powerful. And, when we're giving tours and things, sometimes it'll be like, people will say, I could never do that. And my reaction to them always is, well, you're probably the person that needs it the most. So,
Yeah.
But it is that's our longest therapy that we offer. It's 1 hour.
Hmm.
So it's really going in there. And I actually, to be fair, I usually don't do a full hour these days, and I get in that frequently. But I almost always fall asleep when I'm in there.
Really?
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay.
So it can be just very, very relaxing, and yeah, if you can't tell, I'm a big, big fan.
I can't tell. At
Yeah,
first, I think back in the day, based on stuff I was seeing you share, I would have said cryo was your
yeah.
favorite because you
Oh
were
yeah.
in that tank, as I
Oh
remember, like a lot.
yeah. Absolutely.
It was probably, to be fair to you, it
Yeah.
was probably during peak, Ironman training. So it was
True,
warranted,
true.
but
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do believe in all these things, but that is
yeah.
probably the biggest benefit is I probably am our biggest user.
I was just going to say, going back to like designing it, my brain goes to, if I were to do this, what are the things that I want to do? So it's
Yeah.
like, your own designing your own recovery place. Like, okay, which speaking of which, we've missed one too, because don't you have a sauna?
We do. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got a couple more here actually. So yes, we do have infrared sauna. We actually technically have two saunas because we have a standalone sauna unit, and then we actually have a contrast therapy room. We'll jump into that in a
Mm.
second afterwards here. But yeah, the infrared sauna. Most people are familiar with saunas. The biggest thing though that we get asked a lot of people aren't sure on is the difference between a traditional sauna and an infrared sauna, right? So a couple things with that. So the probably or comfort wise, the infrared sauna actually you don't put it as hot. So ours goes up to about 160 degrees, where most traditional saunas are going to be in the 180 to upwards of 200 degrees, which
Mhm.
even that 20 degrees can make a pretty significant difference. But more importantly, once you start to sweat in a traditional sauna, the heat can't penetrate through that moisture, whereas the infrared can. So what the infrared is really doing is it's helping with the detoxification process and really opening up your pores and allowing things to excrete out that way.
Hmm.
And yeah, can be nothing better really than getting out of the sauna, taking a nice shower, and just how nice you're clean and good you feel after that.
Yeah. You're right about that 20 degrees because the gym where I
Yeah,
train,
yeah.
people love to jack that thing up, and so much so that they've kind of
Started regulating it.
they have started regulating it. So it's
Yeah,
basically turned all the way up, and then the timer is
yeah.
the thing that you can regulate. And
Okay.
so there's this one woman every morning who just loves, so she'll turn it on, go do her workout, and
Oh,
then come
great.
back. And that thing
Gotcha.
is cooking. And I
Yeah,
usually get, sometimes if I have enough time, I'll get in after her.
yeah.
And holy cow. I mean, it is take your breath away,
Yeah.
kind of situation. And I do try to use it like a little bit of, mental training. It's like,
Sure.
you're fine. There's the door. You
Yeah.
can leave whenever you want, like, stick it out, but man, I look at the temperature gauge and I'm like, okay, we are approaching 200 degrees. Like, this is quite warm.
It is. But I mean, and also I guess from a athlete perspective, there is the heat acclimation aspect of it, right? That can be
Yep.
really valuable, and I'm a big fan of. And I should say, I actually probably use the infrared sauna more than anything because I do have one at my house and I use it almost every day if I can.
Oh
So
man, Adam's gonna hear that, and we're gonna have to get one. He's been talking about trying to get like a standalone, like outdoor
oh,
sauna for the
that would be.
house.
I do have an indoor one. I still, even with that, I would love to get it out like a 5-6 person one. Really make it a good family environment, and people in there. I think
Yep.
it's awesome. So
My social media feed for a while was filled with the ads for the Costco.
yeah, yeah,
So,
okay,
it's like,
yeah,
I'm like, I can clearly tell what Adam's been looking at because now my Facebook feed is filled with these Costco, like, build your own,
right, right.
sauna in a box type
Yeah.
things. But
Well,
I do
there's
like it.
so many different ones out there. I mean, got to be a little careful. Like you can find one on Amazon for like $200 now. These like, what's the right word? That you can like put them together and they're like portable and kind of like dome piece things and
Mhm.
stuff. So, I don't have a ton of experience, so I'm not going to say, but just, yeah, I guess be careful with what you're doing. Make sure that it is supplying you with what you're actually looking to achieve out of it.
Yeah,
But
it
yeah,
is definitely one of those things that I'm using and definitely going to build up some tolerance to for the heat acclimation
yeah,
because, living in New Hampshire, we might get some heat, but
yeah,
it's in fits and starts. It doesn't typically happen until much later. And so
Yep.
if you've got a hot race,
Hmm.
it's, April, late April now. It is 70 degrees outside
Starting to
right
warm
now,
up
but it's
there. Yeah.
overcast and really humid. So we don't really get the same kind of cooking
Yep.
heat that lots of other places get. And if you're going to race in that, um, you got to find alternative ways to get it. And this is one of them. So,
Totally. Yeah, I'll throw out, if people are looking to do some heat acclimation where they're not necessarily in a place where they're going to be in that environment, right? I'm a big fan of doing your training for the day, trying to jump into a sauna as quickly after that as possible, not drinking anything during that session.
hmm.
And then actually another thing that's pretty important with that is trying to allow your body to cool down on its own as opposed to instantly jumping into a cold, even a normal temperature or a cold shower to try to cool your core temperature down.
Hmm.
Because part of that acclimation is forcing your body to try to regulate and do that itself.
Yep.
So people that are considering, a big fan, like I said, I think it is very valuable. And that's something I recommend if you're trying to do that.
So then I think the next like good place for us to go is to talk about contrast therapy because you
Yeah.
were just mentioning that. So,
Right.
because people will say, well, I want to do heat acclimation, but I also want to, so it's almost like an oxymoron, heat
It is.
acclimation, contrast therapy. So, similar tools, but different application, like different result that you want. So you kind of want to understand the results that you're looking for before you pick the thing you're going to do, right?
Exactly right. Yeah. So the contrast therapy, right? So that is where we have our cold plunge, and then we have an infrared sauna in there as well. So you can rent it out for 30 minutes to an hour, and basically you can just go back and forth. What we've found and the research seems to show is typically a 2 to 3 minute plunge followed by somewhere from between 10 to 15 minutes in the sauna, and kind of going back and forth between those is what
Mm-hmm.
can be the most beneficial. But you're 100% right, Megan. It's really is about what you're looking to achieve with it. And I like to do that on like hardcore recovery days where like it's maybe I've done for me a swim or something in the morning. I'm a really big fan of like a couple days that are pretty light training wise. And so actually, just I even go. We have that now, but there's actually a place in Newton, Massachusetts. It's called Kelo, Kelo,
Hmm.
and they have actually men's and women's days. But
Oh,
it's
cool.
become kind of a tradition with my dad. We've gone 3 or 4 times now where we go and do that together, and it's really nice. And but I do really, I mean, just even with the infrared sauna itself and the heat in general, you do have to be careful not to overdo it, right?
Yeah.
If you do push yourself past that limits, it can really generate quite a significant amount of fatigue, and put you back, hydration wise and so forth. So you do need to be careful with it, but also can be extremely rejuvenating if you do it correctly.
Can you go back for a second because
Yeah.
I think we skipped over one of the things you said, which was not to drink when you're
Yes.
in the sauna. Can you tell people why that is?
So it's primarily just to ensure that we're not aiding in the cooling down
Mm.
process, right? So you're trying to ensure that, and I don't know if people you're familiar with like the core tracking sensor, right?
Hmm.
So that you can look at your core temperature, right? But we are ultimately trying to raise our core temperature during this, right? And so if we're doing things to prohibit that or reduce that, it's not going to maximize the benefits.
Got it.
Yeah.
Good.
Now, great question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is that it? Have we hit all of them?
We do have one more actually. So we have what's called the Nano V, which actually we didn't have when
I
you
don't know
guys.
this
I
one.
think when not certainly not after the Ultra there. So um, I like to say this one. It's so what it is it's a breathing device almost. So it actually has distilled water that it's circulating through its machine, and then you can have it directly go in through your nose, or you can just have a little piece that kind of comes up close to your face, and you inhale this kind of vapor water, if you will. And it really has a lot of the similar benefits and to talking tracks, kind of to the photobiomodulation. But the biggest difference, obviously, is PBM is working from the outside in, where
Mm.
the Nano V is working from the inside out. So what you can actually do is lay in the PBM and then have the Nano V connected to you as well. So you're kind of hitting it from both different ways. And so we do allow people to get that combo there. And that is good stuff right there.
So it's just water, or is it like negative ions, or like is there some sort of
Yeah. So I I'm actually not sure I can explain exactly the
It's
magic,
magic.
that they're doing there. If you check out the company, I think it is nanov.com,
Okay.
NANOVI.com. They actually probably, of all the modalities we've been talking about, have the best research and actual clinical kind of studies and things that they've done. They've got a handful of like professional baseball players that speak highly of it. Like I've definitely become a big fan. Like when I've gone away to big races, like I'll actually take it sometimes from peak and say, sorry, it's closed off for the weekend. And that's one of contrary to the PBM, you cannot overuse it. So like I'll do it a couple times a day. And, you know, all these things, it is hard a lot of times to truly validate whether, how much is
Yeah.
working, and, things could be placebo, but I bring it to all the big races now, and I believe in it.
It's your good luck charm.
Yeah, yeah,
Some
exactly.
people have a talisman, you have this whole machine, this whole contraption.
Which is heavy. It's not easy to get to Hawaii and things like
I
that, but
was
I
just
still
gonna
bring it.
say, like, you're rolling it through TSA. People are like,
I checked that one. I can't imagine that would go very well. Actually, that's funny you mentioned that. I remember trying to carry on my compression boots one time, and them looking at me like that the main power unit was like a bomb or something like that. And they did. For a second, I thought they were going to take it from me. And
so
yeah,
I have two quick stories for you about that same thing. I can't remember if it was to or from Tahoe a couple years ago. I had one, a bag of Tailwind.
okay, yeah,
Yeah. And two, I had brought a but so I'm of the decision that like if TSA loses my luggage, I need to have
your
at
stuff with it, right?
least the
Yep,
first, set
yep.
of stuff for the
Smart,
very first
smart.
day of whatever race so that I can run. So
Yep,
I had a whole bunch of bars, like Go Macro bars and stuff like that, packaged up in a Ziploc bag
yep.
in my carry-on. Well, my bag gets flagged and they're rifling around through it. And apparently, if you pack bars like that tightly together, it looks like C4, and they're
Yep.
not happy with that.
Well,
So they pull my bag. And then I think it was on the way back, I carried the Tailwind through. And they, I can't remember if it was open or not. And of course, my bag gets flagged. The guy opens it up,
yeah.
pulls out the bag, and he's like, I have to swab this, right? I'm like, yeah, I mean, but it would be a good disguise, right? If I was going to bring like powdered cocaine through TSA, just mask it as a bag of Tailwind. So yeah, just word to the wise,
It
if you
is.
put those
And
things
actually,
in there.
a quick nugget I'll give you on that too is, so if I'm the same thing. Even when I travel for work or whatever it may be, I always bring a ton of nutrition stuff with me, and I'm bringing it in my carry-on. What I recommend people do is put it in a Ziploc bag, just like you did, and actually take it out of your bag
Oh
and
yeah,
put it on the runway as its own thing. Because then that way, one, they'll only inspect that if they have to. But a lot of times when you expose it like that, it
yeah,
seems like it allows them to just let it run. So
yeah. You're not trying to hide it.
exactly,
You're like,
exactly.
here,
So
swab
yeah,
my Tailwind.
some good travel nuggets there too.
Yeah. Yep. Luckily, I've not. Oh, I have another one too. Luckily, I've not tried to bring my poles because obviously, like, you
Ah,
can't bring poles. But one time, usually when I run around here, I have a little knife in my
yep, safety.
my
Yep,
vest,
sure.
my set. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a very nice knife,
Okay.
and my Adam drove this item to us when we were down south, and then I was flying back with the bag, got all the way to security, and realized I didn't take the
You got
knife
this.
out,
Yeah.
and the TSA agent scanned my bag, and and he pulls it, and I'm racking my brain, and and they were very good natured about it.
Okay.
He like looks at me and he's like, I can tell you're trying to figure out what
What?
in this bag. I'm
Yeah.
like, a
Always.
100%.
Yeah.
I have no, I'm like, I have nothing. And then he pulls out my Solomon vest and I'm like, ah, and he like starts laughing so hard. And he's like, okay, what are you going to do with this? I had to go back through
Back in,
security,
check it. Yeah.
open a FedEx account at the FedEx
Oh,
kiosk and mail it
because the
back to
bag's already
myself.
gone, right?
'Cause
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't checking a bag because it was like
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
we had driven down. We had flown down. Adam drove. Me and my nieces were flying back. So Adam was just going to take my bag
Yeah.
back, but I wanted my vest because
Yeah.
when I got home, I wanted to
Of
run.
course, right?
Didn't even think like, hey, Megan, you have this knife that needs to not go on a plane. but they could totally tell that it was
It
not,
was an
yeah,
accident, right? Sure.
totally an accident.
Sure.
Meanwhile, my
Yeah.
sister-in-law is like, what are you doing? It's like, sorry guys, we did not miss the plane, it was all good.
I know. I was going to say, it's like clearly you got there a little bit early, which is good.
We did, yeah. I'm not a
Rushing would have
fan
been a
of
different
like
story.
running to planes at the very last second.
Yeah.
Okay, so I really want to ask you this question because you clearly have access to all of this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Is there like a Colin Cook approved recipe for,
Ooh.
you know, like, because you mentioned like some of the stuff you like to do, but is there
Sure.
like a good recipe for people that maybe they can?
Well, I'm actually going to start with something I always like to usually talk, or when I'm talking about our modalities. The number one thing you can do for yourself is get good sleep, right? So, while I truly believe in everything that we have and it can help enhance things, if you're not going to commit to proper sleep, start there.
Mhm.
That is just so important and really where, the ultimate recovery happens. So,
Yep.
would like to mention that here for hopefully validation here, but it's
Yeah.
important, but I really like, so from an athlete perspective, I would say, the whole body cryotherapy and the PBM. So typically doing the whole body in the cold actually first, and then going to the PBM right afterwards. That's really a great combo and something I try to do. But it really depends on the mood and kind of what I need, I feel, at that point. I mean, usually I am pretty tired, and like the floating and the recovery aspect of that really seems to benefit me very well. I think because I've done it so many times too, I guess I should also say, if we go back to floating, like some people don't have a good experience the first time. Like they just can't relax. And even when you're doing it, it's like, am I really going to float, and these things, right? So you're not allowing yourself to really relax, which is what is critical about it, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely things that, they say really you should give it 2 to 3 sessions with the floating before you say, yeah, this isn't for me if, it doesn't work out. But usually within that time frame, you say, okay, this is very relaxing. But hands down for me, like floating is the number one. And I do feel like muscle recovery wise, it helps extremely well. But, if I'm post, we'll say an Ironman for me, I'm going to get into the whole body cryotherapy as quickly as I can. And that's definitely going to help with that inflammation and things. Also to kind of contradict what we do, I'll also say we do need inflammation in our body if we want to recover.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not always all about instantly trying to just reduce the inflammation. Right. So, what I'm a big fan of, and like what I do as my own kind of protocol these days, like I mentioned, I have a cold plunge in my house. I do that first thing in the morning. So, hopefully gotten a great night's sleep, but you've allowed even that inflammation and things to carry over to the next morning. Then you go into the cold plunge, or you do something to try to reduce that inflammation. And then, for me, typically it would be heading into a workout or something at that point afterwards. So, it really can depend, I would say, and what time of day and those kinds of things, really, if you want to get into the nitty gritty of trying to maximize things. But the other thing I'll say, and kind of to the demise or the challenge of peak recovery, is like we live in such a reactive society, right? Everybody wants to wait until they're broken and then they want to go get themselves fixed, right? And even certainly within sport, and like we have so many customers that are broken when they come in. We fix them and we say, okay, well, yeah, there's like the recommended continued protocol, and they're like, what do you mean I'm fixed? Like I don't need you anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so and also, as I'm still recovering from my hernia surgery, and what I've experienced in my training recently, and like the challenges of always being hurt or kind of working through that, it just makes training so much less enjoyable.
Yeah.
Right. So, if you're really serious about your training and trying to achieve goals, do those proactive things. I'm not trying to sell you on peak recovery. I'm like, do those, whatever you can, even stretching, right? Stretching is so critical, and when it's done properly and at the right times, to set yourself up for success. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say my biggest thing is for people is, invest in yourself and do those things to try to keep yourself healthy, instead of waiting until you're broken and then, trying to work backwards through that and investing through the roof because of all the things that you've limited yourself on and not done what you could have to prevent that.
Yeah, I agree 100% because that's kind of my uphill battle with a lot of my people is trying to get them to invest in mobility and,
Yep,
doing some of that stuff as the precursor or even the a way to eliminate the
yep,
need to go to PT, like because you don't get an overuse injury or you don't,
exactly.
this, that, or whatever. And so I feel like that, is the complement to getting stronger from the inside out. And then
Exactly.
your stuff is also the complement to like that. I don't want to say daily maintenance because
Right.
obviously you're not going to be able to do
Sure.
all that peak stuff daily, but being able to do some of this stuff sporadically as part of kind of a regularly scheduled maintenance program, kind of like you have for your car, right? That
Exactly.
you would kind of do the
Well said.
same thing here, like,
Exactly.
get a float in, go get some cryo when you've got like an excess amount of inflammation and you're starting to get, just to the point, like you said, where your training is no longer fun or productive. Like
Right.
that's, too many people think that, oh, it should be a suffer fest and I'm not going to get the result I want unless I truly suffer for this thing during training. And I'm always trying to, I know you're the same way.
Yeah.
It's like, it's, yeah,
Totally.
like we need to add some load. We need to stress the system, but like there is a point of a deflection point of no return here where all you're just going to get is terrible results if we don't
Mhm.
take care of it before jump off that cliff metaphorically,
Save
so
that misery for the, last portion of the race,
yeah, yeah, like the home stretch, just lay it all lay it all out there. Absolutely. Well, I think this has been really helpful for people because we hear all these terms, like we know all these things exist, cryo and float and like saunas, and but no one really knows what tool is the best thing for whatever they have going on. So hopefully, through your explanation, people have kind of been able to think like, oh, well, maybe that float would be helpful for me. Or yeah, I could go do local cryo on my knee. That story you told about your client is so amazing. Just that,
Yeah.
going in and coming out and being able to jump.
I mean, especially too, like you think pre-race, if you do have some niggles and things like that, right? Come in and, get that inflammation down and really, put yourself in the best spot to try to perform, when it really matters.
Yeah, and to your point, I think most people think of it as a reaction, not
Yeah.
something that you do proactively. And
Yep.
that's what I'm hoping people will get from, listening to you talk about these different modalities is like, oh, they're not just stuff I do after I'm broken. It's stuff that I can do proactively to help me not get broken in in
Right.
whatever capacity.
Well, totally right, and it goes back to kind of what not to reiterate, but that we talked about with training, right? If you're not absorbing that training, but if there's a way that you can help improve and speed up that recovery, that's just going to set you up that much more to either go faster or do something better in your future sessions. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely should be a win-win there.
So, where can people find more information about Peak? Like, are you guys on social media? Like, where can people?
Kind of.
Kind of.
No, we have our website is peakrecoveryandhealthcenter.com or prahc.com is the abbreviated. We post on social media every once in a while. I think Instagram is peak_recovery. But we're not overly active on there, to be honest with you. Social
You're
media is
too busy.
not my best thing here, as much as it is a great avenue to get exposure. But yeah, but come check us out on the website. And certainly, if anybody has any questions about anything or looking for something in their area, anything I can do to help, would love to help people. Really enjoy seeing people perform well and live life to the fullest here. So
Yeah.
anyway I can do that, I'd love to.
Awesome. Well, this is the point at which I put in a very shameless plug for you to open a Peak over here
There we
because,
go.
Manchester's like an hour away. So if we could get one
I hear
closer.
you. I like it. I like it.
We need like a Monadnock region one where it's like, a little bit closer. I do think
Yeah,
someone in Keene was doing a
there was a
float.
float, but I don't think
Really?
it's there anymore. Yep. Yep.
And
Yeah.
I get that, like, our population demographics, like just population size or density, I should say, not so much demographics,
Yep.
may or may not suit it, but I'm
Well,
starting
no.
a little groundswell here of
All right.
people,
I like it.
that
I like it. I mean, convenience is king, right?
yeah.
It needs to be something that you can regularly do, right?
Hmm.
And that can be hard. And yeah, I mean, we do have people like yourself that do travel 45 minutes an hour, but doing that on a regular basis is a real time suck. And especially for athletes, that's a very valuable thing that we have, and we need
Yeah.
to manage the best we can, for sure.
Yeah. Well, you noodle on that. Not like you need another thing to do because
I'd love to. I would love to.
yeah, in addition to working your full-time job, you also, and being an athlete, you also coach athletes and,
Yeah.
like, I'm not exactly sure how you manage to do all of the things that you do during the days and weeks. Cause, every time I open social media, even though you're not on there all the time, I'm always like, oh my God, now where is Colin? He's over here. You were at the marathon the other day. Now you're over here. You were at a training camp not that long ago. So, I mean,
An
how much
amazing
sleep
life
are you
to
getting,
start
Colin?
there.
That's what I
But
really want to know.
that's a great question. I'd happy to come on again and kind of talk about efficiencies of life or whatnot, if anybody be interested. But
Totally.
I go to
Totally.
bed very early is my short answer. We go to bed the same time our kids do, so it's usually
Yes.
8:30, and I can assure you I do get my sleep. And if I don't get my sleep and I feel tired, then I never set an alarm.
Hmm.
And if I need to sleep through or that mean missed training, I'm going to miss training.
Oh my God. I really hope people hear that. Like,
It's
dramatic pause for a reason, because there are so many people who I know are like, picking themselves up by the back of the shirt and dragging themselves through their training. And it's just like, okay, but you can do that for a finite amount of time. But
something's going to crack, something's going to break, in a not good direction if you continue that for too long, for sure.
yeah. What do you have coming up for races this year?
Plan is to do Eagleman 70.3 down in Maryland in June. I'll do Ironman Lake Placid again in July. And then hopefully Nice, the Ironman World Championships for the men in September.
Awesome.
And then the 70.3 World Championships are in Marbella, Spain in November here.
Cool.
So yeah, should be a nice, good season with a couple trips to Europe, which I haven't done a ton of, and would be a lot of fun. But still working through some recovery and hip challenges and things here. So we'll see what happens. But that's the hopes here.
Good. All right. Well, I'm going to be keeping tabs on you like we always
Much
do.
appreciated. No, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, it's a real honor to be on this podcast here and connecting with you. And I really appreciate you, taking the time to think about recovery for your listeners.
And I should mention, you have a podcast too, where you talk to some of your athletes and whatnot. So tell people where they can, if they're interested in your, 70.3 Ironman multisport stuff, where can they listen to you?
So that podcast is called Age Grouper for Life. So you can go to agegrouperforlife.com, or we're on most of the podcast scenes as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Colin. I really appreciate it.
It's not as highly ranked as Megan's here, though.
No.